This is a Razor MX650 with pit bike brake, actual pit bike brakes of motorcycle. 2-piston, CNC'd. Where do you get them? Off AliExpress. They're like $22 a piece. Here's a brake mount adapter for a 74mm pitching rotor for a 220mm. And this is a 4mm thick, 4-bolt rotor that goes to these wheels. Here's a heat sink to keep things cool. There's thermal paste under that. The idea behind any of this is that it can be put together very cheaply in all reality, and you get the exact same speed as a Razor MX650 during stock of no mods, yet you get the increased handling with these 4 to 5 inch extensions. You even have foot pegs. Idea being behind these that you actually can stand on the points with the balls of your feet, and somebody can sit back here on this point, and there's room up here to scoot up and put your feet. We have a 73 tooth. This is a 4-bolt chainring design that is meant for dirt bikes, and so is this, but yet this is a 8x10 spacing, I believe, versus versus like 12 or something. But it's basically, there are 2 or 3 different motor shaft diameters for these to fit on, and this is a undersized motor shaft fitting for an oversized chain size than what would typically be used, because this is a 420 size chain. So 9-tooth sprocket, 420 chain, 73 tooth rear sprocket, and this is a 12-inch 80 to 100 rear tire. This is a 14-inch 60 by 100, and they both use 12mm bearings. You can find these on Amazon for essentially $90 a piece. And this is using a stock battery, upgraded rear shock that's longer, so pushes up the height, just not too much. I'm using it in the second position, the highest, to push it up. It's controllable with a lockout and air adjustment, and even a second one, I believe that would be for the negative air chamber. And then what do we have over here? Let me explain. So when you're gonna put a new wheel size on a Razor MX650 of say most people wanna go up just 2 inches on each, because you start with a 12-inch front and then a 10-inch rear. A very, very small rear tire and wheel. But if you try and put these wheels on a stock Razor MX650, you will run into issues with the travel. So the stock fork length of here to here is 630mm. This is a 680. I honestly would recommend, I've seen there are 3 to 4 different, there might be a 710 out there, but we have a 630mm fork for your 10-12 front and rear. Then I would recommend a 680 instead of the ones that are going on bikes right now. Of the ride or die forks are 630mm, and if you're doing a supermoto with slick tires and whatnot to go fast, it actually does sound great. But if you're trying to do off-road and put 14-inch wheels instead of a 12 on the front, I would recommend a longer fork. This is 680, but if you'll check here with the level of the ground, this is tipped forward. So they make longer forks around 630, and then I saw a 680, and I am realizing now, in terms of the center of it, a 710 if they make one, and then I know for sure that they make 735s. That would raise the bike enough to get the tray level, and then you would have a better center weight to where you would be able to lock up this front wheel a lot easier to do stoppies. So this is using dropped foot pegs. These are ride or die. I tried to use some JB Weld, but it doesn't really matter. They stay in place really well. CNC foot pegs from them. You can find these on AliExpress for like $10–15. Essentially, the thing with AliExpress is you just gotta wait 1 to 2 months. But if you can wait that long for a project bike that you're gonna have to spend a long time working on, it in all reality can be worth it and work out really well. This right here, you'll see with these washers, I was trying to space out the bike because this almost hits, but it all ends up working because you need this chainring. You cannot use the adapter that is sold in the Electro & Co. 10-inch Supermoto wheel set. That adapter is for a smaller 4-bolt design and also sticks out too far. It would be about right here, and then the spacing for the actual chain itself is essentially kind of perfect. If you could add one more and space it back, but what would happen is if you look here, this rear wheel is just a couple degrees off from center, but if I were to add a whole another 2 links, because it's in out, it would be too long. I'd have to space this out all the way to back here. So what are the benefits of this? What is the idea behind this bike? It is actually to show people physics, because I see the comments of people wrongly assume that this weight of this ring itself is somehow holding the bike back, and that's not true. When you have 650 electrical watts being sent through this motor, that's not a limitation. I come from a background of mountain biking and cross-country racing, where we use power meters to test the output of our power, so I'm pretty familiar with seeing wattage numbers, and it didn't make sense to me the way that companies were trying to say that you should only choose just higher and higher power and more voltage to make your bike faster, but if you look at the torque numbers, they are lower. And so what you actually need is a high RPM motor that can spin fast enough to actually get you the speed. But the torque can come from your volts and your amps, but the thing is, you're just throwing power willy-nilly at it. And what this is physically the exact same size as the rim. And so if you will imagine, just aside to this, a wheelchair. A wheelchair actually uses very big wheels, and the rails on them are very close to the actual diameter. So imagine, you know, this being able to grab this and move the wheel on its outer weight, because it's rotating on this axle. It is rotating mass. And so if you're actually able to grab from near the top of it, it's actually really easy to move this bike that weighs probably about 100 pounds. Because of what I took off and put on, I removed the inner triangle and then put on other parts, took some off, I'd say that I probably actually saved some weight and didn't put anything on, yet I went up in wheel size and all the geometry is extended outward and no discernible loss. Only benefits in all reality. The idea might be that you can get your finger caught up in here, and the thing is, I can prove that I had my thumb right about here in a diagonal fashion, just deep in there. All you have to do is roll it back and it came out. The bed of my nail is still alive. If you look at these gears, in all actuality, they are wide and not sharp. Smaller chain sizes actually use sharper gears, and those would actually be more dangerous because they could actually puncture your skin instead of crushing it. So there's a difference in forces there. I did get a comment from somebody saying that this 420 chain is too heavy, too big for this little bike. That's not true, and I'd love to prove it to people, because with the exact same battery and motor, everything else is different. You can see that you'll get better torque and you'll get the exact same top speed, even though you have this big rotating mass here. So the fork is about $150 to $200. You can find this on Amazon, and you just search whatever length you need and then search pit bike fork, and you'll find the legs, and you can find these. What you will run into issues on is if you try to fit it directly into the headset, you need a adapter, unfortunately. But that is what the ride or die fork adapter set really did help with. You genuinely can't find anything else like it out there. Pretty cool stuff. I'm just trying to say that there's certain parts that you can get and not have to pay an exorbitant amount if you live in the US. So, how did I get these brakes? These brakes are actually a incomplete set. You buy them as the levers, the hoses, and these calipers all separately, along with these, which are the pitching mounts. I've attached them with, I believe these are 8 or 10 mil bolts with a 6 millimeter actual inner width on the threading for the diameter, and then the pitch is 1.25, I would expect. And so this just attaches to normal forks that come from the like, you can get a ride or die adapter for mountain bike brakes. To get a smaller, it's slimmer than the 74 millimeter pitching. 74 is the distance here to here. Mountain bike brakes use a slightly less wide distance. And then these bars are about $30. They are cheap, but they are decently strong. The actual walls of them are like 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch thick. That's not a very accurate description of it, but they are pretty thick, and it's stiff. It's got a brace. You can clamp it down with these bolts. So I actually upgraded the charging port. This comes off of Amazon for about 20 bucks. It's just an outdoor rubber thing for an outlet, and so I just screwed it into the plastic. It's thin plastic, you can cut it off. I've altered it here, cutting this down, curving this, and then allowing this so that I can have this Velcro attach everything. And inside is JB Weld and the XLR charging port. You can stick basically anything in there. You just cut out the back part of the plastic, and then it even comes with a little rubber booty to go around a cone that is right in here. So for the brakes, hose, caliper, and lever. That's all you need, and you need 2 of each. This is routed in a non-normal fashion because I come from US mountain biking. I put this as the front lever and this as the rear. So untraditional, because you have the throttle on the right side, you typically don't want a right rear brake on your throttle side due to issues with, as you're pulling it back, your distance of your fingers is always changing. You can even fit a mirror on there. I've got a phone mount. Yes. So this is a kickstand for essentially like a 450cc dirt bike, and there's 2 springs in here. There's a loop welded to this, fits perfectly. What I did on this side is I took 3 washers, a small bolt that fits into here, locked it in. Then essentially for this side I put a washer and a bolt, and washer on the other side, and 2 other bolts. So it's a pretty thick 6mm bolt. And then this on this side is a just kind of metal, big thick piece of circular metal washer that's like 3 mils thick. This is actually supposed to go in here, but what will happen is this will be too high and hit this as it's swinging, so you need a pretty clear access point. I put some washers on to raise that bolt up to give more clearance, but yeah, it attaches just fine, swings like a normal 450 kickstand, and it'll rub on right here, which is where this bolt for the motors are at. This one's rounded and silver. I don't think it matters. It fits surprisingly well. And then on the other side here, you can see that I have another bolt locking it in, and it just holds this as a bumper piece to the kickstand. So I also moved the power on and off switch to the top. This did come from the side. Yeah, to me it's more convenient, and I've shed a lot of weight off the bike and got the fender back on. We got the number plate. Honestly, instead of me yapping so much, I can try to prove my point, which is that this bike is actually... So now we're actually going to test whether or not this bike has the same top speed as the stock Razor MX650. Whether or not adding all of this is actually going to slow me down. It very well could be that this is too heavy and too big for this little bike. But let's find out. Let's see what the actual numbers say. 14, 14.6, 15. Let's get going on some flat. So here we got a rise, so you can show off the torque. You can see it spinning just fine. And the thing is, if you try and go up this slope on a normal razor, you'll actually stall really easily. Even though for somebody like me who's 125 pounds, you're gonna be going really slow. So this actually has pretty even suspension because the fork is very soft. And so it actually creates a pretty playful bike for somebody around the 100-pound to 150-pound mark. And then you can do essentially almost anything you want on it. Because you have such a big gear in the back, it's able to wind up and get over most things that it really shouldn't be able to for 650 watts. The idea is that you can take this design and upgrade the motor and battery all you want. It's a principle of showing how people should be trying to obtain torque from their motor so that they can wheelie easier, go up hills easier, instead of having a top speed that goes 50 to 70 miles an hour and causing a bunch of laws and regulations to crack down on everything. People would keep their speed down and raise their torque. We could avoid a lot of issues on the road. So because you actually have a large range of torque, I can just hold the throttle and I will get up on 650 watts of power. So why motorcycle brakes? Why such thick rotors that are 220 millimeters? The reason is very simple. It's not big enough on the stuff that is being sold right now. They are putting mountain bike brake onto a 100+ pound electric pit bike, which is not a good way to stop the bike if you want to actually mess around on it. And so to mess around on small bikes like these, you need a more controlled solution, and I opted for the 2 piston calipers versus the 4 that are available, the quad piston calipers. You can get them for the same mounting system as these bolts and back there, but I would honestly think it could be too high. This is using DOT 5.1 fluid. It calls for DOT 4 fluid, but if you do your research, you can see that DOT 5.1 and DOT 4 are actually mixable. They are just a different version of the same chemical that can bear higher heat. So you can actually mix DOT 4 and DOT 5.1 and create a fluid of almost identical performance. You don't want to mix DOT 5 with any of the other stuff. That's what you don't want to mix. But yeah, even though on the back of this caliper, it says, you know, warning, brake system, use only DOT 4 brake fluid. Well, guess what? Dot 5.1 is actually better and the same thing. So you can put dot 5.1 in here and it'll tell you your levels. The brakes bleed themselves as you brake. They can pop up bubbles. Just come up here. You can take this off, fill up the brake. Not too bad. So for the brake hoses, this is actually a 900 millimeter hose, and the rear right here, I would say could be shrunken about 20 centimeters to a 1400 millimeter, or you could do what I did and have a little loose, and this is a 1600 millimeter, 160 centimeter, or 90 centimeter for the front.